I was actually the one at the scene. I was the one that was yelling out to arrest her. I was actually the one who called the cops first. I saw
Alright.
them when they were fighting in the beginning, and I was like, "This is not right." He was slamming her with a door when she was standing in her door frame, not even close to the female on the other side.
I can't believe
Her
y'all
baby
running with
daddy
this
was
shit
literally
though.
slamming the door on her back. He grabbed her by the waist. She tried to wiggle away from him. Her arm was like literally almost getting free with his arm around her neck at this time, because he was holding her by the waist in the beginning and she wiggled out. After this happened, he had her in the like almost looking like a headlock to me on the side, and then
But I was there, and I know for a fact none of that happened. How they just explained it.
and he stated, "Oh, she's gonna go get her gun. She's gonna go get her gun. Watch." She stated, the other baby mama stated, "I'm gonna shoot you, bitch. Watch me shoot you, bitch."
But my truth will get out here.
And after this happened, she ran to the passenger side of her vehicle, grabbed her gun. The woman, the mother, who slipped away from him for at least like maybe a good second. As soon as she slipped away, she shot her, and she shot her in the face, on her side, and in her thigh.
The truth still ain't out, and we motherfucker had one court appearance. That shit is crazy.
Let's talk about the name that's all over my comment section, Carlos Smith. Since the day Romeca Blackmon was ambushed at her son's school, you all have been asking the same question. Why was Quadajah Johnson arrested on the spot, but Carlos walked away? Some of y'all are calling him the mastermind. Others are saying that he's the one that pulled the strings. But legally, why is he still walking free? Well, today we're going deep. We're investigating Carlos Smith's specific actions that morning and breaking down the legal reality of accomplice liability. We're looking for the truth, not just the theories. To understand his liability, we have to look at the timeline. We know that the shooting happened around 9 o'clock in the morning in a school zone. According to reports and what we've seen in discovery, the allegation is that Carlos drove Quadajah to that location. Now, let's look at it from an investigative standpoint. Why was he there? If he was just giving a friend a ride, that's one thing. But your comments point to something deeper because y'all have noticed his behavior in the aftermath. The silence at first and the lack of an immediate arrest. Many of you believe Carlos positioned Quadajah there specifically for an ambush. Well, think about this. If evidence shows that Carlos knew Quadajah had a weapon, or that they discussed a quote-unquote confrontation beforehand, then Carlos Smith's presence at the scene changes from him being a bystander to being a participant. So let's get into the law a little bit. In many states, including the state of Illinois, there's a concept called the law of accountability. And this means you can be held just as responsible as the person who pulled the trigger if you aided, abetted, or even attempted to aid in the commission of a crime. But here's the hard truth that's frustrating for a lot of us. In the eyes of the law, simply knowing a crime might happen or even being present when it does happen, it's not always enough for a conviction. You see, prosecutors have to prove intent. They have to show that Carlos intended to help Quadajah commit that act. And this is likely why the state hasn't moved yet. The state is looking for the smoking gun, if you will, in the digital evidence, like text messages or location data that proves an agreement was made before they arrived at that school. The state still has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Quadajah Johnson herself intended to kill Romeca on September 8th. The charge of murder in the first degree is hinging on intent. In Illinois, the prosecution doesn't have to prove premeditation, but they do have to prove intent in order for those charges to stick. You might be thinking, Nikki, if they have the evidence, why wait? Well, there's a strategic reason. Sometimes the state keeps a secondary person on the hook, if you will, without actually charging them to ensure that they'll cooperate later on down the line. Is Carlos being used as a witness? Well, we're definitely going to explore that possibility as well. Also, you have to keep in mind that forensic data takes time. While the video of the crime scene gave the prosecution enough to charge Quadajah Johnson, proving a conspiracy literally takes months of extracting data from phones and building a case that can't be picked apart by a defense attorney. And we all know that this defense attorney is waiting on the tiniest slip up from the state. She's been fighting for her client's release since day one. Proving a conspiracy to murder in Illinois is such a lengthy process because the state prosecution must go beyond showing simply that a crime occurred. It must prove there was a hidden agreement and intent. Unlike direct murder charges, which relies on physical evidence like a weapon or DNA, conspiracy cases are built on complex layers of communication and coordinated behavior. Not charged now doesn't mean not charged ever. And know this, the state has years to bring charges against Carlos Smith if the evidence pans out in this case. We learned that the defendant, Quadajah Johnson, had been seeking a restraining order against Romeca Blackmon since December of 2024. There were several failed attempts to deliver the order because Romeca was living at an undisclosed location because she was in fear of Carlos Smith. Carlos knew where Romeca worked, and he visited her at her job, even got into an altercation with Romeca and her co-workers on the job site. Why Carlos didn't tell Quadajah to have Romeca served at her workplace is beyond me, because he gave Quadajah the school address where Romeca was killed. Is it possible that Carlos knew there were no cameras positioned in that spot that could capture the crime? I don't know. But once again, in a court of law, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And proving conspiracy is no easy feat for the prosecution. It just means it's going to take some time. How much time? We don't know yet. But I want you to hear about a legal strategy that helps defend clients against conspiracy charges. Let's listen in.
I've seen people get indicted on conspiracy cases just for being around the wrong people. And then the whole case falls apart, though, because the government couldn't prove the way that they were actually part of it. And that's the part that nobody explains. Conspiracy isn't about what you did by itself. It's about what the government can prove that you agreed to do. And there are a few specific places where these cases break down. So if you're looking at a conspiracy case, listen up. First off, the government is going to fail if they can never prove a real agreement. This is one of the biggest ones. The government stacks texts, they'll stack calls, relationships, and they'll try to turn that into a conspiracy. But being around people, even knowing what they're doing, isn't enough by itself. They have to prove that you knowingly joined the plan and that there was a meeting of the minds. That's the term. And that's where a lot of cases fail. Secondly is when the case charged doesn't match the case proven. So let's say they'll charge one huge conspiracy. They love to do that. The bigger the conspiracy, the better headlines. But the evidence will actually show multiple smaller disconnected groups. That creates what's called a variance problem. And it matters because evidence starts bleeding across different defendants. People get tied to things that they weren't actually a part of. And that's one of the things that we specialize in. We're sentence mitigation specialists. We fight for downward variances, especially in these huge conspiracy cases. And thirdly is when the government's timeline doesn't hold up. Conspiracy cases stretch timelines all the time, especially when there's cooperators. But if someone can show that they weren't involved during key periods or that they pulled away before certain acts happened, that limits what they can be held responsible for. That's another place sentence mitigation comes in, guys. We try to limit what you are held responsible for to push that sentence guideline down below the guidelines. And here's what ties all this stuff together. These cases are often built on cooperating witnesses trying to reduce their time, huge narratives that sound convincing, and assumptions about intent. But when you break that stuff down element by element, agreement, scope, timeline, that's where things stop lining up. And that's how conspiracy charges actually collapse.
At the end of the day, your concerns about justice are valid. Whether it's the Carlos effect or just a slow legal process, we're watching this case every step of the way. But I want to hear from you. Now that we've looked at the legal standard for accountability and the factors that contribute to the time-intensive investigation needed to prove a conspiracy, do you think the state is building a conspiracy case, or do you think Carlos Smith is going to remain a witness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and as always, keep it respectful, but give me the facts as you see them. So we've looked at Carlos's actions on and around September 8th, the basics of accomplice liability, and the enormous and precise work needed to prove conspiracy. And yet still, there's this million-dollar question. If Carlos was involved, then why hasn't the state moved yet? Is it a lack of evidence, or could there be a much more difficult legal hurdle standing in the prosecutor's way? In part 2 of this series, we're going to go into the meeting of the minds. I'm going to show you exactly why proving a conspiracy in this case is one of the hardest things a lawyer can do. And we'll discuss the specific piece of evidence that could change everything for Carlos.
Challenged the credibility of the state's key witness. We also heard again from Smith, who disputed claims made by prosecutors, including allegations that he fist bumped Johnson after the shooting and physically assaulted the victim seconds before she was killed.
I'm just tired of the lies and everything, what they said I did. I know for a fact it wasn't true. I didn't headlock her. I didn't beat her with the door. I only try to defuse the situation. They keep deflecting away from that. And what I did what they saying I did made it sound harsh, and I didn't do that. So we need justice. We need justice to be served too, the truth.
You don't want to miss this next episode of Can He Be Charged? So hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming for the truth. Thank you for being part of this conversation. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who could use this message. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. Then meet me in the comments. We can continue the conversation there.